Northern France, June 3rd, 1944, 3 days before D-Day. A German fuel convoy rolls through the darkness, 10 lorries laden with thousands of litres of petrol destined for panzer divisions positioned along the Atlantic Wall. The drivers maintain strict blackout discipline, no lights, no conversation, just the rumble of engines and the knowledge that Allied aircraft could appear at any moment from the moonless sky above. They never see the man in the shadows. He's dressed as a farmhand, but the small package in his hands tells a different story. As the convoy slows to navigate a damaged bridge, he moves with practiced efficiency. 30 seconds. That's all it takes. A magnetic clasp, a twist of the wrist. The device attaches to the fuel tank with barely a sound. By the time the lorries accelerate away, he's already melting back into the French countryside. 40 kilometres down the road, the lead driver smells it first. Petrol. Not the usual trace you expect around fuel lorries, but something stronger, more immediate. He glances at his mirrors and sees what looks like a thin mist trailing from the tank. Before he can process what's happening, the lorry behind him erupts. Not an explosion, something worse. A blooming sphere of flame that engulfs the vehicle in seconds, the heat so intense that the driver's scream is cut short before it properly begins. Within minutes, 8 of the 10 lorries are burning. The fuel that should have powered German tanks for a week is now a funeral pyre lighting up the French night. Wehrmacht soldiers scramble to contain the damage, but there's nothing to contain. The petrol is simply gone, transformed into heat and smoke and the acrid smell of burning rubber. This wasn't sabotage as the Germans understood it. No explosives, no obvious attack. Just a simple device, no larger than a cigarette packet, that could turn a fuel tank into a bomb without firing a single shot. It was called the Incendiary saddle charge, and in the months surrounding D-Day, it became one of the most effective weapons the British never publicly acknowledged. By late 1943, British intelligence faced a problem that kept senior officers awake at night. The upcoming invasion of Europe would require the largest military logistics operation in human history. But the Wehrmacht had spent 4 years perfecting their own supply networks across occupied Europe. German fuel depots, ammunition dumps and supply convoys operated with mechanical efficiency, protected by guards, patrols and an increasingly paranoid security apparatus. Traditional sabotage methods were failing. Explosives were bulky, difficult to conceal and required significant technical knowledge to deploy effectively. Resistance fighters caught with demolition charges faced immediate execution. Even successful attacks often resulted in the capture and death of entire resistance cells. The risk-to-reward calculation was brutally simple. Too many dead partisans, too little disrupted fuel. The Special Operations Executive had tried conventional approaches. They'd dropped standard limpet mines, time delay explosives and incendiary devices behind enemy lines. Some worked, many didn't. The problem wasn't the destructive power, it was the deployment. A resistance fighter needed to approach a target, place a device weighing several pounds, arm it correctly and escape before discovery. Each step multiplied the chances of failure. Consider the numbers. A typical fuel depot in occupied France held roughly 200,000 litres of petrol and diesel. It employed perhaps 20 guards, with regular patrols every 30 minutes. Perimeter fencing, dogs, searchlights. Getting inside required extraordinary luck or suicidal courage. And even if you succeeded, a standard explosive charge might destroy 1 or 2 tanks, whilst alerting every German soldier within a kilometre. What British planners needed was something entirely different. A device so small it could be hidden in a pocket, so simple that anyone could deploy it without training, so subtle that its placement wouldn't be detected until far too late. And most critically, it needed to work not through explosion, but through something more insidious, the inherent volatility of the fuel itself. The Germans had made their supply network remarkably efficient, but efficiency created vulnerability. Fuel moved constantly, thousands of lorries, railway tankers and drums in transit across occupied Europe, each one a potential target. Each one vulnerable for minutes or hours when it passed through territory where resistance fighters might be watching, waiting, hoping for any weakness they could exploit. By autumn 1943, the British estimated that disrupting German fuel supplies by even 20% could critically hamper their ability to respond to an Allied invasion. But achieving that disruption through conventional sabotage seemed mathematically impossible. The SOE needed something revolutionary. They needed a weapon that turned the enemy's own fuel against them. The answer emerged from Station 9, the SOE's camouflaged research and development facility hidden in the Hertfordshire countryside at the Frythe. Here, among the unremarkable brick buildings disguised as a country hotel, engineers worked on problems that conventional military thinking couldn't solve. Their brief was simple: create chaos with minimal resources. The incendiary saddle charge represented a radical departure from traditional explosive devices. Rather than relying on detonation, it exploited a fundamental property of petroleum: volatility. Petrol doesn't explode, it vaporizes and burns. Given the right conditions, that burning happens fast enough to seem like an explosion, but the mechanism is entirely different. The device itself was deceptively simple: a curved metal housing roughly 8 centimeters long and 4 centimeters wide, designed to fit snugly against the curved surface of a fuel tank. Total weight, approximately 170 grams. Inside, a small amount of thermite, a mixture of aluminium powder and iron oxide, surrounded by a delay mechanism that could be set for anywhere between 30 minutes and 12 hours. The entire assembly could fit in a jacket pocket with room to spare. Here's how it worked. Once attached to a fuel tank via powerful magnets, the delay mechanism would count down silently. When triggered, it initiated a thermite reaction. Thermite doesn't explode. It burns at approximately 2,500 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt through steel in seconds. The device would burn a precise hole through the tank wall, typically about the diameter of a pencil. Small, controlled, deadly. That hole changed everything. Petrol under pressure, even the modest pressure inside a moving lorry's fuel tank, would spray out in an atomized mist. That mist, meeting air, created ideal conditions for ignition. The heat from the thermite reaction provided the spark. What followed wasn't technically an explosion, but the effect was indistinguishable. A rolling fireball that consumed the vehicle in seconds, fed by hundreds of litres of aerosolized fuel. Manufacturing took place at several facilities, primarily in the workshops at Station 9 itself. Production numbers remain classified, but estimates based on SOE records suggest somewhere between 8,000 and 15,000 units were produced between late 1943 and mid-1945. Each device cost approximately 7 shillings to manufacture, roughly the price of a good meal in wartime London, making it one of the most cost-effective weapons in the British arsenal. The genius lay in the simplicity. A resistance fighter needed no technical knowledge: approach the target, remove the safety pin, set the delay, attach via magnets, walk away. The device would do the rest. If discovered, it looked like a piece of mechanical equipment, perhaps a fuel gauge or sensor. Even if identified as hostile, by then it was too late. Attempting to remove a thermite device mid-reaction was suicidal. You simply had to watch the vehicle burn. The magnets deserved special mention. They were powerful enough to hold the device firmly against a moving vehicle, but designed to fail at extreme temperatures. This meant that once the thermite reaction began and the fuel ignited, the device would detach and fall away, often consumed in the flames. Evidence literally melted away, leaving investigators with little to study beyond a burned-out vehicle and a mysterious hole in the fuel tank. If you're finding this interesting, a quick subscribe helps more than you know. Deployment began in earnest during spring 1944 as Allied planners prepared for D-Day. The devices were dropped to resistance networks across France, Belgium and the Netherlands, accompanied by minimal instruction. Photographs show the device. Diagrams show attachment points. Text explains the delay mechanism. Nothing more was needed. Records of specific operations remain fragmentary, but certain accounts survived the war. In the Dordogne region, a resistance group called Oiseau reported destroying 11 fuel lorries over a 3-week period in May 1944. Their method was elegant. A single operative would cycle to a pre-arranged point along a known supply route, wait for the convoy, attach devices to multiple vehicles as they slowed for a turn, then disappear. Hours later, scattered across kilometres of French countryside, the lorries would ignite one by one. The psychological impact on German drivers proved almost as valuable as the physical destruction. Imagine being a Wehrmacht soldier responsible for transporting fuel through hostile territory, knowing that at any moment your vehicle might spontaneously erupt in flames. No warning, no attack, just fire. Some drivers began conducting inspections every few kilometres, desperately searching for devices they barely understood. Others refused fuel transport duty altogether, despite the consequences. Exact casualty figures are unknown, as German records often attributed these incidents to partisan activity or mechanical failure. The Gestapo investigated multiple cases where fuel convoys simply vanished. Vehicles found burned by the roadside, drivers dead, no obvious signs of attack. In some reports, they noted the presence of small holes in fuel tanks, but failed to understand the mechanism until far too late. One particularly successful operation occurred near Chartres in early June 1944. A team of French resistance fighters, coordinating with SOE liaison officers, managed to attach devices to 16 separate railway fuel tankers in a marshalling yard. The delay mechanisms were set for 6 hours, allowing the train to depart and travel approximately 80 kilometres before the first tanker ignited. The resulting fire consumed the entire train and rendered a critical railway bridge unusable for 3 weeks, exactly the disruption Allied planners needed as invasion forces consolidated their beachhead. Not every deployment succeeded. Some devices failed to ignite. Others were discovered during routine inspections. The Germans eventually issued guidance about checking for magnetic attachments, though by then thousands of litres of fuel had already burned. The simplicity that made the device effective also made it impossible to completely counter. You couldn't search every vehicle constantly, and even thorough inspections might miss a device placed in an awkward location. The Germans had nothing equivalent. Their sabotage efforts focused on explosive devices, powerful but obvious. The Abwehr developed various time delay bombs and incendiary mechanisms, but these typically weighed several kilograms and required significant technical expertise to deploy. They prioritized destructive power over subtlety, a philosophy that worked well for commando raids, but poorly for clandestine sabotage. American OSS teams used similar incendiary devices, but their designs tended toward larger explosive charges. The Americans favoured the Firefly, a thermite bomb weighing approximately 900 grams, 5 times heavier than the British incendiary saddle charge. It produced more fire but was harder to conceal and place. In comparative trials conducted in 1944, SOE instructors demonstrated that a single operative could place 4 saddle charges in the time required to deploy one Firefly. The Soviets characteristically took a different approach. Their partisan units relied primarily on explosives and direct assault. When they sabotaged German fuel supplies, they did so with demolition charges and automatic weapons, effective but rarely subtle. Soviet methods prioritized immediate, visible destruction, a propaganda value as much as military necessity. What made the British device superior wasn't raw destructive power, but operational flexibility. A 170-gram device could be carried by anyone without raising suspicion. It worked equally well on moving vehicles or stationary tanks. The magnetic attachment required no tools. The delay mechanism provided escape time without complicated timing systems. In cost-benefit terms, few weapons in the Allied arsenal delivered better returns. The Germans eventually captured several devices intact and attempted reverse engineering. Reports from Wehrproof, the Wehrmacht's weapons testing department, show they understood the basic mechanism, but struggled to recreate the precision of the British delay system. By the time they developed a working prototype, the war was nearly over. The British advantage lay not in revolutionary technology, but in manufacturing quality and operational deployment, getting the right weapon to the right people at the right time. After the war, several nations copied the design. The French military adopted a variant for their own special operations units. The Americans incorporated elements into their Cold War sabotage toolkit. The basic concept, a small magnetic incendiary device for attacking fuel supplies, appeared in multiple military manuals through the 1960s. The British had created not just a weapon, but a template. Assessing the true impact remains difficult. The SOE destroyed many of its operational records in the immediate post-war period. German documentation is incomplete, with much lost during the chaotic final months of the war. What survives suggests significant disruption, but precise numbers are elusive. Conservative estimates place the number of destroyed German vehicles at several hundred, with fuel losses in the tens of thousands of litres. More importantly, the devices forced the Wehrmacht to divert resources toward convoy protection and vehicle inspection, soldiers who might otherwise have fought Allied forces. The psychological effect on German logistics personnel created a climate of paranoia that slowed operations and reduced efficiency. Did the incendiary saddle charge change the outcome of the war? Almost certainly not. But it contributed to a larger campaign of disruption that made German resistance to the Allied advance measurably less effective. In the weeks following D-Day, when every litre of fuel and every hour of delay mattered, these small devices played a role in degrading German mobility. The legacy extends beyond immediate military impact. The incendiary saddle charge represented a philosophy of warfare that prioritized clever engineering over brute force. In an era increasingly dominated by massive bombing campaigns and artillery barrages, Station 9 proved that a 170-gram device could achieve effects disproportionate to its size. The modern smart bomb and precision munition trace their conceptual lineage back to this principle. Why destroy a city when you can destroy the specific target that matters? Surviving examples are rare. The Imperial War Museum holds 2 intact devices in its collection, never deployed. They sit in a climate-controlled case, unremarkable to casual observers. Most visitors walk past without a second glance. Yet these small metal objects represent thousands of hours of engineering work, hundreds of successful sabotage operations, and an approach to warfare that valued ingenuity over industrial might. Northern France, June 3, 1944. A German fuel convoy burns. The farmhand who placed the device is already kilometres away, cycling through the darkness toward another rendezvous, another convoy, another chance to turn German fuel into Allied advantage. He doesn't know the technical details of thermite reactions or the precise temperature at which steel fails. He doesn't need to. Someone in Hertfordshire understood those details, engineered a solution and placed it in his hands. This was British warfare at its most characteristic, understated, precise, devastatingly effective. No grand gestures, no overwhelming force. Just a small metal device, magnetically attached, silently counting down. The Germans had tanks, artillery, and industrial might. The British had Station 9, a handful of engineers, and the understanding that sometimes the most powerful weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming. In the aftermath of D-Day, as Allied forces pushed inland against fierce German resistance, every burning fuel lorry, every delayed convoy, every diverted guard contributed to victory in ways that can't be quantified on battlefield maps. The incendiary saddle charge wasn't a wonder weapon. It didn't win the war single-handedly, but it embodied a principle that proved decisive, that intelligence, properly applied, multiplies force. The device worked because it understood fuel not as a resource, but as a vulnerability. The Germans needed petrol. They moved it in tanks. Those tanks could be penetrated. Fire would follow. Simple physics, weaponised. Today, the concept seems almost quaint, a magnetic device with a thermite charge. In an age of drone strikes and satellite guided munitions, the elegant brutality of the incendiary saddle charge feels like archaeology, yet the principle endures. The best weapon is often the simplest one, deployed at exactly the right moment by someone brave enough to walk up to a German fuel lorry in the darkness and attach a device that would turn petroleum into flame. That farmhand in northern France never received a medal. His name doesn't appear in official histories. But on that June night in 1944, he changed the mathematics of war, one fuel tank at a time. The Germans had the resources, the British had the trap. And sometimes in the cold calculus of warfare, that's all the difference that matters.